Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Making It Simple. Hope you're doing great today. Looking forward to being with you as we continue in this study on growing. We looked in depthly over the last 6 lessons, and I really didn't intend for it to be that long, but there's so much material there, and in order to give you quality time, we break those things down into generally 15, 20 minutes, whatever, somewhere in that neighborhood. So in order to do that, sometimes it takes a little longer, but in order to really grasp what is being said, I think it's important that we look at every stage. And when we think of growing, oftentimes as we look at the importance of that in the last series of messages, we continue that, but also looking now at stages. With growth, everything has a beginning. We talked about that in the last lessons, but what does that look like if you stayed in the very first part? In other words, infancy. I want us to look at that now for the next couple of days, next couple of lessons. We're going to base this message, lessons, whatever you want to call it, out of 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and the first 9 verses. Now, I'm going to read this. Sometimes I do this, especially when I'm preaching, but I think in order to set the stage for this series of lessons that'll be upcoming over the next maybe, I don't know, 3-4 days, I'm not sure. But I think it's important that we understand the message that Paul has here in its entirety. So I'm actually going to read it to you twice. I want to read it to you from the King James, but then I'm going to read it to you from the Message. Now, again, this is not about asking people to accept or like versions of this. I want you to hear the clarity of what is being said. Very same thing, 2 different clarifications. So here we go. Chapter 3, 1 Corinthians, beginning in verse 1. And I, brethren, could not speak unto you as unto spiritual, but as to carnal, even as unto babes in Christ. So you're not ready to hear because you're not allowing yourself to grow past the infantile stage. I have fed you with milk, I prepared you, and not with meat. So I'm not giving you something that you're not ready for. For hitherto you were not able to bear it, neither yet now are you able. You're still not ready. What's going on? Why are you not growing? For yet you are carnal. For whereas there is among you envying, there's jealousy, there's strife, divisions, are you not carnal and walk as men? For while one said, I am of Paul, and another said, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? Who then is Paul? Who is Apollos, but ministers by whom you've believed, even as the Lord gave to every man? For I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither is he who plants anything, neither he who waters, but it is God who gives the increase. Now, he who plants and he who waters one, and that every man receives his own reward according to his own labor. For we are laborers together with God. You are God's husbandry. That's ownership. You are God's building. It says that God is the husbandman of the vineyard. He's the owner. He's the one that created it. Let's read that again in a little more clear way. Some people get mixed up by the hithertos and the wherefores. And again, I like them all. I get something out of every version that I've got, and I got a whole bunch of them because in the process of studying and learning, it is my job to make it as clear and understandable as possible. So listen to this. But for right now, friends, I'm completely frustrated by your unspiritual dealings with each other and with God. Now that is as clear as it gets. Here's one addressing the crowd, and he's saying, you're not treating each other right, but what you're doing is not okay with God. You're acting like infants in relationship to Christ, capable of nothing more than nursing at the breast. Well then, I'll nurse you since you don't seem capable of anything more. As long as you grab for what makes you feel good or makes you look important, are you really much different than a babe at the breast, content only when things are going your way? Sounds like modern times, doesn't it? When one says to you, I'm on Paul's side, and another says, I'm for Apollos, aren't you being totally infantile? Who do you think Paul is anyway? Or Apollos for that matter? Servants, both of us. Servants who waited on you as you gradually learned to entrust your lives to our mutual master. So we're just teaching you what God said. We're growing together. We each carried out our servant assignment. I planted the seed and Apollos watered the plants, but God made you to grow. It's not the one who plants or the one who waters who is at the center of this process, but rather God who makes things grow. Planting and watering are menial servant jobs at minimum wages. What makes them worth doing is the God we are serving, and you happen to be God's field in which we are working. Now, I want us to think about much of what is being said here. We talked about in this last series of messages about growing and what that looks like. Paul here too is addressing that, but he's looking at it from you're stuck. Why are you still at this one place when you've been given all the material that you need to advance? We see Paul's frustration in this verse. The reason why is because, again, they had been given all the material they needed to accomplish what had been asked of them. They'd been given all the material they needed to grow. They'd been taught the truth. They'd been given the heart of this message, the truth, the honesty, the meat, if you will. I mean, they'd been given what they needed to grow beyond being an infant, but they weren't showing it. You remember in the last series of messages, I talked about the importance of the outward witness, not just the verbal. Because again, words are words. And as we get older and the more that we deal with certain situations, the more we realize that that's really what that is. Until one produces something, it's just words. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But until it comes to be, that's all that is just words. You know, and a lot of times we find that that's all it's ever going to be because, well, that's a different story. But we see here the actions. You're arguing amongst yourself. You're acting like, I mean, what is wrong with you? There's envy, there's strife, there's division. What are you doing? That's what Paul was saying. What are you doing? What is wrong? The actions that he could see among these that he's addressing, they didn't show maturity. They didn't show any signs of growth whatsoever. And Paul says, I am completely frustrated with you and the unspiritual dealings that you're having with each other. Okay, so that was a physical, visual thing. I can see how you're treating each other by your actions, certainly can hear your words and whatever. But then it gets even stronger. He says, I'm completely frustrated with your unspiritual, which is another way of saying ungodly, way that you're handling and dealing with each other, but also your unspiritual dealings with God. In other words, the life that you've been called to live, the outward witness, not your verbal, your outward witness, your reflection of God. We are made in the image of God. Nobody's seeing that. by the way you're treating each other. Now, I have taught on this for years. One of the greater divisions between the spiritual world and the world, the church and the community, whatever you want to look at it, is that it's sometimes, quite often, sadly, a mirror image. In other words, well, I'm out here and I'm looking in. I don't see anything different. So why would I want to leave one set of strife and envy and chaos to join something else that's the same thing? That's a legitimate question. Again, that's not to be ugly or judgmental or pointing fingers, but think about it for a minute. If you're in a barroom fight, everybody's knocking each other's teeth out, everybody's pulling hair, throwing chairs, whatever the case. You're in this one. And there's another group right across the street. And the advertisement, the reputation, the word is that that's a different place. They don't do that kind of stuff there. They have a whole different way of doing things. So you leave this to walk over, and just as you're getting ready to walk in the door, you look through the window, but yet still you see exactly what you just left. Well, why would you go into that? It's just a different set of people to fight. Paul is saying here, the way you're dealing with each other is not okay. And even greater, the way that you're dealing with things of God is absolutely not okay. We need to strive, obviously, to work better together, treat each other better. That's not a question about that. But why? Not just because we can win each other's favor or find new friends, because that's who God called us to be. And if we have a desire, if we truly, in the last lessons we talked about caring for other souls, that's part of our growth, the love for one another. And it's not because of, again, just mere emotions, warm and fuzzies, and what, but I care about your soul. If that is not there, then we can't possibly be creating an example for anybody else to see, to want anything else to do with what we talk about. So what Paul is saying here when he says, I'm completely frustrated with you, he's saying, you know better. You know better. It's not about you are better, but then again, that's true too. Not in a I'm better than you, but I've been given tools to act better than this. He says, what are you doing? Why are you acting this way? You're no different than the world. You're no different than anyone else, for that fact. And how could you possibly be representing Christ, who you've been introduced to, who you've been taught, who you've come to understand is Lord and Savior? How could you possibly be representing Him by acting the way that you are and have any expectation that anybody else wants anything to do with that? I've said this quote probably 1,000 times. I don't know how many times, but there was an atheist on television many years ago, a vile man, vile. And I won't give his name because I don't want to give him any credence. But he said one thing that was true. He said one thing that it pained my heart when I heard it. And it was just a little snippet, a little quote from his show, because I would never watch the show. But he said this. He was studying all the religions of the world and the this and the that. But he's particularly hard on people of the Christian faith. And here's what he said. He said, here's my problem. I have no problem with Jesus. None. He said, in fact, I believe that the historical account of the person of Jesus is true. He said, I don't believe the deity part and being, God and whatever the case. He said, but I believe in the person of Jesus. He said, here's my problem with those who say they follow him, because by all accounts, everything that I've read about him, they act nothing like him. That's what Paul is saying. Look at what you're doing. Look at how you're acting. You know better. You know better. So one could read this regardless of the version that you read it out of. And you could say, well, Paul seems angry. Paul seems truly, he says frustrated, but he seems angry. Yeah, but it's not anger. It's his passion for the souls of others that is coming out. He said, what are you doing? How do you expect anybody to want to be a part of what we're doing, not just in membership, but in truly surrendering their heart to Christ, when you say that you have, yet still you act no different? Therefore, there's no sign of growth. Do we see why that's important? Do we see? He's saying, you're acting like babies. You're acting infantile in relationship to Christ. You seem to be capable of nothing more than still nursing at the breast, yet still, you're way too old for that. You should be way beyond that. We've moved to the next level. When we talked about the conversation that Jesus had with Nicodemus in the last set of lessons about you must be born again, he made it clear. He made it clear this was not an option. This was not pick A, B, or C, which one you want. This was a must. This had to have happened. He said, if you desire to enter the kingdom of God, you must be born again. Paul here gives a stern message, a very stern, very clear message to the believer. So what we need to understand is we're talking about those who have publicly stated, those who have said to those around them or to their whatever, I belong to Jesus, the believer, if you will. Paul is saying to them, and that's what this set of messages is for as well, you're not growing. Paul is saying you're not growing, but it's not because you don't have the ability. It's not because you don't have the tools or the proper equipment, if you will. But what has happened is you've become complacent. You've become comfortable. In many ways, you've become unwilling to do anything else. Now, I'm probably going to stop right there because I want us to think about what that means. Oftentimes, when one gets to that place, they've determined, I've done all I need to do. I don't need to do any more. I don't need to maintain. I don't need to continue to work that hard. I don't need to continue to grow or learn. There comes a point in time in life to where certainly there are certain things that we don't want to do anymore because we've reached a level of age or maturity or whatever. But when it comes to our witness for Christ, that can always get better. That can always grow. That can always improve. And I want us to understand that as we look at the infant stage of growth and why it's important that we work hard to not stay there. This series of messages over these next few days, I believe it's going to be very impactful. I encourage you to join me. Thank you for your time. As I've been noting on my Facebook post, equally these messages are available on my YouTube channel. I want to encourage you to tell others about that because many people aren't on Facebook, and that's a great thing. It's a platform, obviously, that I was introduced to a few years ago for various reasons that has allowed me to grow an audience, to let people hear my heart and share these messages. But I want to share it with more. I want to encourage you to check that out, but let others know. Give them the link, let them know. Go to YouTube, type my name in, whatever, and check out. Every one of these messages are housed there, plus others from the past, and we'll continue to do that and grow that. Subscribe. You can click the like thing so you'll get notified and all that other stuff. But being an infant, why do we not want to stay there? Why is that an important part of our growth, but only a stage? God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.